Right on. Thanks very much, Trevor. It's a pleasure to be in a soundproof room and not have to be locked in it in a padded shirt. So that's good. Uh, Here's my info. Again, this is the 5th webinar, so you should have that, but it's always going to be up there for you. I am Jeff Johnsgaard, Training on Purpose by Design. I've talked about the naming of that company and why, and that little kind of icon there is a brain upgrade. So I truly believe that better decision making and better actions, it's not necessarily the technology. You know, putting a TV screen on a gun doesn't necessarily make you a better shooter, or certainly doesn't make you a quote-unquote better gunfighter, as it were, but upgrading the software. So hence the logo there. A software upgrade to their brain is what will do so. This one, Wired to Act, designing split-second officer responses. And I choose that word very specifically, responses, and we're going to get into that in this webinar. So the foundational premise, or probably one of the most foundational premises, is this one. So here's a key slide for you. Training doesn't help performance. Training that we're talking about, especially in this webinar, it actually defines default performance when they're under time pressure. That's the key here. So with that, let's look at a couple of videos quick. This guy notices an officer walking up the driveway, goes back inside to get a kitchen knife. Officer has no idea. There's a couple officers responding. I'm sure you've seen this video. It's not a commentary on the actions. We just want to see what takes place so we can talk about it. Switches hands with the knife, tries to push mom and dad back. Officer telling him to get away, finally takes him to the ground. Another officer arrives, and the rest of it. Yeah, so, you know, what did you notice is what I would say if this were a training. This is just a full send presentation for an hour. You know, Trevor and I will discuss a couple of things, but thinking about split-second decision making, you know, what stood out to you? And this is where I'd pause it and ask, you know, whoever's watching to kind of chime in on it. Well, let's just watch it one more time, but not the whole thing. There's only about 1 second of time from the time he said police department to the stop of the video. So here we go. Boom. So I would say that he's committed to an action at this point. Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Right? And there's 1 second of time. So all I want this video to highlight is the extreme time compression that this occurred in. And we're going to watch a couple more. So now in this one, this officer's called to a neighborhood. There's a report of what they said was kind of like a youth or a younger person walking around brandishing, waving around a handgun. This video starts, it happens very quickly. The officer, hey, can I see your hands? You see the officer has nothing in his hands either. And within less than a second, certainly less than 2 seconds, he's already fired a round.
Oh, shit! Shots fired! Shots fired! It's fake! It's fake!
Well, shots were fired already. Of course, you can hear the young guy yelling, "It's fake! It's fake!" And where did he hit him? Interesting to note. Where did
it's fake! It's fake! Shots fired! Drop to the ground! Drop to the ground! Drop to the ground! Drop to the ground! Drop to the ground!
And not just the hand, but the hand holding up.
Hands behind your back! Hands behind your back!
And here we go. You see it right there.
Oh yeah, there we go.
So he shot him in the hand holding the weapon. I would call that, especially given the speed that took place, like amazing accuracy.
Yep.
I guarantee he didn't equal height, equal light, or see his dot or any of that, because it just happened so quickly. So interesting to note that that decision to use deadly force and the targeting, all the rest of it, did that occur in more than 2 seconds or less than 2 seconds? Well, of course it was less, right? That's the whole point of what we're talking about here. So now another note, have you ever acted as a role player, you know, in force-on-force training and been shot in the hand holding the weapon? Yeah, I mean, that happens all the time. I can't stress this enough. That's actually our fault as instructors, because shooting someone in the hand holding the weapon is an attentional fixation that we have to then train out of them. We have to train them to go, oh crap, that's going to hurt me, put my eyes and drive my weapon system towards center mass. So we allowed that training scar to stay in there. This is a direct result of your training design and delivery. All in the attention webinar. I believe that was number 2.
Yep.
So I'm referencing back to these other webinars because the whole point as we keep going is they're tying together. All right, so The key understanding for decision making in a split second is, of course, time, right? So that's what we're here to talk about. So 2 seconds or more, or 2 seconds or less. Time to decide and act. Do you have 2 seconds or more? I'll talk about it in a moment. You're basically using an OODA loop. Or do you have 2 seconds or less? And then, well, you're not using an OODA loop or conscious, decision making. So what are you using? Well, so here we go. One last one. We've got a deputy who's at a B pillar. She's already been dealing with this guy. I've shown this video before, but it's just a great example. She's asking him to roll his window down.
Roll it down. Roll down the window. Roll down the window.
As I use this video, I say to people, what are you noticing? And hopefully, I'll pause it, and hopefully they're going to say incongruent behavior. This guy's like not understanding how to roll a window down, yet he's driving a vehicle. His head's going one direction and his body's going another direction. Well, what do you think he could be doing? Well, he's making a plan of some kind. Now, is that just because he's doesn't want to talk to the officer, or is that because he's going to pull a pistol and shoot at her three times? Luckily, he doesn't hit her. Well, that's exactly what's happening. So let's just keep watching this video. Ask yourself, what are the cues ahead of time, hopefully, and noticing the change there. If we played it again, you would notice a change in his demeanor, probably when his hand finally found that pistol. And then a change in his demeanor as the window came down. Why? Because he was basically committed to an action, had a plan, and the rest of it. So that change in behavior right before he drove that gun towards her face, her head, neck, or upper chest, which again is 86% of the time cops killed in the line of duty by a firearm. When it's a firearm and a felony, shot 64% of the time in the head or neck, 86% of the time head, neck, or upper chest, which would include, that upper arm area, which could disable that and things of that nature. So that directly informs the, quote, techniques and skills that I will be wiring into my officers, but also this just yet another video in another context. You had at a doorway, you had at a B pillar. I mean, we've got so many videos of, just with people, out in a larger area, for example. But the time compression is there. That's the point of what we're talking about here. So this webinar takes off from 2 webinars ago, I believe it was, and that would have been predicting and preventing errors in policing. In that webinar, we talked about one sliver of an area, which was decision making in less than 2 seconds. Well, this is an entire webinar on that because it's so important. So when errors are occurring in under 2 seconds, and I'm just priming you with some pictures here, you can see there's a vehicle and some cops, and there's a gun driven, and actually it's live firing. These are just still images of videos. This is the traffic stop study done by Force Science, where 93 officers were put in 3 traffic stops, and as they, dealing with basically some freeman of the land stuff, having to negotiate and deal with a driver who was shouting at them, and at one point the driver finally goes to grab a pistol, drive it at them, and shot at them. Well, the point of this is to say that 90 out of 93 officers did something very not optimal, which was conducive for them, moving into not only staying in the line of gunfire, but trying to outdraw a trigger press, moving back perhaps into oncoming traffic, and a mishmash of all those not desirable things. That was a direct result of the training they were put in. So we're going to get there. But this slide says it. The officers in this study, they didn't decide wrong. They executed what was available when time compression was there. They went to the first thing that was wired into them with your, my training. And it was very not optimal. That's the point of this. That's the point of this one. So I ask you, even pause the video here. Think to yourself, is there a difference between a primal reaction and a trained response?
I think everybody would say yes to that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So then the whole point is like, okay, so now what would a primal reaction look like? Is that in every human being? Well, it kind of sounds like it would be. A trained response then, does that mean that we wire out a primal reaction and it's gone now? Or does that mean it takes over sooner? Or this is the quality of conversation to have?
Yeah.
right? So why do we train? Well, I would just hazard to say, I would have paused on that slide for a while. Why do we actually train? Well, to improve performance, right? I mean, like at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. Okay, so the problem, I just tongue in cheek a little bit, but the problem is in traditional law enforcement, we just have a box, a method, a way of training, design, and delivery. And I just reference it here tongue in cheek as a hammer. And as long as you're a nail, it works really well, because we kind of have one way of doing business. And if it's not working for you, aim harder, suck less. What's going on? Why can't I get it through to you? And then the graphic here, of course, it worked for the third nail, but the other two, it's just not quite working as well for. Okay, so that's the point of this webinar, based on a foundation of the 4 webinars previous. So training defines default performance under time pressure. That's the second time I've said that on a slide. Remember, that was the key slide here. Yep. So let's just watch a very quick little quote-unquote scenario. These officers are practicing some vehicle extraction stuff, and this just happens to be yet another thing that can happen. So the 2 cops are going to show up. Basically, one cop was dealing with this guy a bit, and then he rolled up his window, he waited for a backup, and now they approach, and here we go. Okay, so that happened very quickly. What we need to kind of pause here and say is, and look, this got sent to me. I know the trainers involved in this, and I thank them for the use of this video. Luckily, I know them, and so I know what they did next was optimal. But if you just left this like, hey, that was a good rep, or how did that go, and then just kind of brushed it off, there could be a lot of issues there. So this guy just pulled a gun. The driver just pulled a gun. The cop grabbed it from his hand, then drew his pistol and shot him. Yep. So he kind of shot an unarmed guy. That guy then just fell over, and that was it. Did that cop do something that wasn't legal, moral, ethical, and necessary? I mean, it could be argued that's the case.
Potentially.
Now, I'm trying to constantly put my people in positions in training where these moments happen, but that decision making, there's a gun, I do the gun thing. It just also happened, I'm a defensive tactics person, and I kind of grabbed at that gun, which is excellent, but I still was committed to doing the gun thing. Yeah. I mean, realistically, we could have just wired in a not optimal response. So when you're training split-second decision-making, and we're going to talk about hood drills, which is kind of a thing in law enforcement as a term, I'm very not for hood drills only because of how you do them. So I say I'm not for them because I do them about 10 or 15% different, which makes all the difference to me. So here we go. Stop wiring in, quote, wrong things. This standard training is what was given to those 93 officers in the traffic stop study. Every single time there's a gun, I plant my feet, I drive my arms out, and I do the gun thing. Yet, in the traffic stop study, right at a B pillar, the gun is within reach, already shooting at me, but I'm committed to the action of trying to get my gun out of my holster. It's just absolutely the quote-unquote not optimal thing to do. We're wiring in the bad stuff. How are we wiring it in? The last webinar we just did, rote mechanical repetition, which is devoid of context, static predictable scenarios. Training removes perception, uncertainty, and timing. And perception, uncertainty, and timing are what makes excellent performance in time-compressed environments on the street. So I reference back to the rote webinar. Yep. There we are. Like, let's just watch that one. Here's the key slide. Now that we've referenced back to those webinars, if the perception is not being trained, decisions cannot be trusted. You might put people into a hood drill or put people into a rapidly evolving, ambiguous thing, and if they do a great job and we don't ask and find out what were they perceiving, thinking, reacting to, then in all honesty, their great performance is not trustworthy because it wasn't founded on something that was proper perception. It was just kind of luck. And that happens all the time. We see people do great. We go, good job, high five, go over there, because we don't have time to talk to you. And then when we see people not do a good job, we tell them they need more stress inoculation, which respectfully, I disagree with that concept. It certainly isn't the way that I get people to act way better, way faster. This is the slide that talks about that. So when we say we have to train perception, I throw the idea of the walking guy and stop hand on there. If you were driving a car, getting towards an intersection, hopefully you know where critical cues are. Look over to see, is it a flashy hand guy, which means critical information that the light might change soon, versus the little walk guy. Okay, well, that's when driving, that's what's important. That's when it's important. If I'm in the intersection already, no longer important. If I'm at a red light that turns green, no longer important. And there's no difference between that and, as I'm sitting here, this elbow angle that we've talked about in other webinars for, the possible grabbing of something out of the waistband or whatever. So this is how you train perception. These are the cues for that. What's important, when is it important, and what does it mean? So I'm not just training action, quote unquote technique, or the physical skill. It's important for that. I am training the system that produces, selects what technique, skill, procedure, or whatever it is. I'm training the system that initiates or triggers that. That's the point here. There are, for example, on my website, not only, of course, all these webinars, you're watching this, plus the NTOA webinar, and, there's just ILEDA and Tactical Edge magazines. There's all of these articles. They're talking all about decision making and decision training. Please give them a look, contact me. I'm happy to help you more with this, right? I just want to, there's more resources there for you. Here's the point. Speed, meaning how quickly something is happening. We know that anyone can produce a gun at a B-pillar if their hand is on it somewhere, whether it's to their head or down at their side or behind them or whatever, in basically a quarter of a second. Well, that is far, far less than 2 seconds, which is what an OODA loop needs. So speed removes deliberation. It's happening so quickly, I don't go, ooh, what does policy say? Ooh, is it better to move right or left? That kind of idea. Pressure removes checking. Yeah, it's super important. I'm getting shot at. I'm getting assaulted. So there's no actual, how is my arm bar working? Am I driving the gun, firing with amazing accuracy at the hand holding the weapon or at the person? There's no checking there. And that's the point of that. That's why I train, quote, gaze action coupling, which is, I think, going to be our last webinar, in specific drills, which is all just a sliver of this decision training. And then, of course, training decides what's left. Well, that on the range, arms all extended, is kind of what we've been doing and certainly do the most of. That's the training which led to dramatically poor performance in the traffic stop study and many others. So understand, back to that idea of a primal reaction or a trained response, there are 3 systems conceptually. I mean, I'm just kind of calling this that idea, competing all at the same time happening. There's a primal reaction, wired experience, and now that could, I say experience, not training, because training is in there, but also just experiences I've been through shade that, and it might not have been formal training. Lots of people show up like, oh, I've been shooting guns my whole life. Well, you're probably the person I'm most going to watch because you might have the worst habits as well, right? And then conscious thought catches up. I'm going to show a video here and put all 3 of these things into it. Here we go. So let's just watch. Loss prevention. These 2 were grabbed up for theft. They're sitting back. There's a police officer off to the right of the screen and a loss prevention officer in a white shirt off to the left of the screen. This is just a snippet in time from this video. This young man's going to start digging through and pull out a gun, aim it directly at the cop. It doesn't work because it's, I don't know if the safety's on or not, I don't know what it is. There's going to be reactions from the loss prevention officer and the police officer and the rest of it. So let's just watch it. Wow, like a lot happened there. So what I just saw was a loss prevention officer shout. He had, and I'll show you some still frames of this video. He had a primal like flinching response, as it were. Whoa, this is happening. He starts to get out of there. Then, of course, his brain starts catching up. He decides to commit to an action. The officer starts to get out of there, but then realizes, hey, I'm trying to save myself, but now I got to get back in there. Officer draws his gun, doesn't shoot. I'm guessing, because I haven't spoken to them. Background's not a good. Foreground's probably no good.
Foreground.
Tells the guy to get out of there. Kid ends up dumping the gun or fell out of his hand. Officer perceives that, which is amazing. Doesn't shoot the kid, goes for a big knee and a holster. Amazing performance in splits of a second here. So let's just look at that. Primal reaction. You see that still image of the loss prevention officer. Wah! The gun is all the way out. This girl has zero idea that it's even occurring. So that's like kind of the rest of society to us, right? Like it was just like they don't even realize that these things are happening. This guy's having this flinch, this freeze, this orientation. We'll talk about OODA Loop: observe, orient, decide, and act response. Then understanding that, quote, flinch, because it's just a term that we seem to understand, this primal reaction. It's not a trained response, it's a reaction. It has to do with your amount of awareness. So if we can increase that, all the better. And that's, so just as one example in law enforcement, we always say, hey, on a building search, expect to find a person. Why do we say that? So that when there's someone there, we don't, and we're like shocked at the presence of a person. Just as an example. So we're trying to get their brain to be more calibrated, or to be more expecting. And we do this all the time. We're just not doing it in a really durable fashion, which is what I'm all about. So now all of a sudden this guy goes from holy crap and starting to get out of there. Now at this point the kid has tried to fire, brings the gun down, starts to maybe manipulate it. I haven't spoken to this loss prevention officer, but you can see him now absolutely commit to something, and it looks kind of like he's trying to grab onto that gun by some moments in time. Now, if I had the sliver into his mind, this loss prevention officer's mind, if that kid was a 300-pound former, MMA Marine looking whatever, maybe not so much going to jump in there. So I would hazard to say that emotionally, this kid, I think this guy figures that he could have some impact on it. Now, this isn't a conscious thought in his mind, I'm sure, but he did commit to that. And so there are ways that we can shade that to happen for or against. But there'd be wired experience. He either trained to do it, or thought about doing it, or attended a defensive tactics class, or was in football, or whatever it was. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying that it's what happened, and it wasn't just, he wasn't born that way. So that is the key point coming out here. He had some emotional coding on it. There is an amazing book on quote-unquote situational awareness, very old book by Mike Spick. It's called The Ace Factor. He looked at World War I and II pilots, and this, I just took a picture right out of the book itself here. You were a flying turkey in World War I and II, meaning you had almost zero life expectancy, as you can see on this slide here, until you had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 decisive, and I'm using this term like rabbit ears here, like decisive engagements, dogfights in the air. And once you had 5, 6, 7 decisive engagements, your life expectancy went so high that there was almost no difference between 7 and 40 dogfight wins. Well, what is that about? Well, the key point here is decisive engagements. You didn't just win by the skin of your teeth. So if we were talking about, again, this loss prevention officer and his committal there, or at the B pillar, you're pulling out a gun to someone firing at you, or whatever your response is, have you been here before and has it worked out, is a key point. So I call it like the emotional residue for the training and experience. And that's a key point coming up when we look at some hood drills in a moment. So you can see that the cop said, hey, get away, get away, get away. Now this loss prevention officer's conscious brain, in my opinion, I haven't spoken to him, has caught up, and he's like pushing and bailing out of the way to allow this officer to either, shoot or move or whatever it is to kind of move in. So there's all three systems we had just talked about, I would say all competing because they're moving. All three of those systems are happening at one time, but the first one was able to execute in a flinching response. The second one, then this primal, maybe trained response or reaction before conscious thought, and then finally the third, in that order, like that. That's conceptually what's going on here. I love this picture because it's like the epitome to me of former British Army, right? How we were trained, Browning high power at 50 yards, single-handed headshots, right? The rest of it. The traditional training in law enforcement is just more reps, better reps, and stress inoculation. Respectfully, that is not sharp. You have to understand webinar 3 for decision making. And now this entire webinar trying to help you with less than 2 seconds. So we have this idea of OODA Loop. I realize I'm on full send here, but you can play this back to your heart's content. OODA Loop, observe, orient, decide, and act. Yes, I think it's excellent. It was taken by the law enforcement community, although for anyone who's done a little research on it, this little loop here is a sliver of what the actual OODA Loop is. The actual OODA Loop takes into account environments and situations, and there's actually feedback at every stage. It's wonderful. The thing about it is when you have less than 2 seconds, boom, there's this guy just pointing a gun out. All of a sudden, you perceive this. You're not using an OODA Loop, right? Shock, novelty, and surprise capture our attention. Shock, novelty, and surprise capture our attention, which is why role players are shot in the hand holding the weapon, which is why that cop shot that kid in the hand that produced the weapon he wasn't expecting. Oh, crap! And he fired with amazing accuracy because of gaze action coupling. We'll talk about in webinar 9. But it wasn't effective fire, right? Because it hit him in the hand, although in that case, everybody's lucky that that's what happened. So if you have 2 seconds or longer, you're using an OODA Loop. Back to the previous webinar 3 in there as to how to go about doing that training. It's all in there for you. But then we've got this conceptually, this fight, flight, or freeze. Well, we've already seen, that's what we talk about. All of a sudden something's happening and I'm having an orientation issue. If I threw a flashbang into a room and it went off with my senses, I would have trouble doing orientation. What's happening? Where are they? What should I do? That's why we do that sort of thing. Exactly. That's why we do that stuff. In hypnosis or other things of which I'm happily trained in for sports, increasing sports performance. I use shock, novelty, and surprise all the time for that. Well, here's our fight, flight, or freeze conceptually. Well, there's an interesting quote I think we've all probably heard, apparently from Mike Tyson. I haven't heard him say it myself, but everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Okay, interesting, but I didn't realize the second part of that quote, which is, then, like a rat, they stop in fear and freeze. That is a very, very telling second part to me. What that says to me is you had a plan, you thought you knew what was going on, then all of a sudden, right, punched in the mouth as it were, something happens that didn't go your way, but then you had no if this, then that. How do I recover from it? There was no way of doing so, and therefore you fight, flight, or freeze. You have this paralyzing orientation. What do I do now? Have I ever been in a situation like this before? And if I was it a decisive engagement? Back to the Mike Spick's book, The Ace Factor. Did I figure it out, or did it just kind of, I still don't know, which is the residue of most hood drills that I have seen. They leave there going, thank God it's over, not, wow, I seem to have learned some stuff, right? So, this is the Force Science Traffic Stop Study. 90 out of 93 officers doing very, very not optimal things. Every one of these pictures, there is a gun firing at them at the moment. And they're trying to outdraw a trigger press, hand on gun, flinching away, backing into traffic, trying to grab their gun, all sorts of things. This is not them choosing wrong. If I were to jump into these moments and go pause on their shoulder and freeze time and say, is there anything else you'd like to be doing? They would go absolutely, and they would do a way better thing. But there was no time because of the speed of assault, hence the speed removes deliberation, and they just enacted the thing that was put into them called stand there, glue my feet to the ground, try and outdraw. Anytime there's a gun, I outdraw it, or I get my gun out and do the gun thing. That's our fault. Again, the training failed them, and that's a key point here. So it was a big gut check for me as a trainer, because that's what I was doing. Okay, Jeff, so if we're not doing this OODA Loop, 2 seconds or longer to orient and to decide and then to check and have another feedback loop there. What are we doing when 2 seconds or less? Well, it's a concept. I mean, we don't really know, but Dr. Gary Klein has done a lot of research on this and has produced some amazing performers in law enforcement, in the special forces community, in the fire community, forest firefighters, etc. Great research, great stuff. Please, reach out. There's great books and research on that. I'm not going to overwhelm you in the webinar on it, but what he says is experts don't compare options. Experts recognize slivers of information. They recognize a pattern, and they just immediately jump to an action. Recognize a pattern, jump to an action. And so that's what we're talking about. It's very easy, so that's why I put this picture on here. In the rules and structure of, we're driving around here in Florida, although this picture's not from Florida, but driving around here in Florida, you're at a four-way stop. There are rules to the road. There's structure to it. As you come up to a stop, there's a pattern there. Who's first to stop? Who's on the right? If you see headlights directly in front of you, that person's in the wrong lane already. I mean, we know what's the only response if I start entering an intersection thinking it's my turn and someone else does. Hopefully, it's just to press the brake. The problem is, in the real world, and I mean, of course this is the real world, but in the world of not driving, where there's all this other structure, rules, and all the rest of it, it's a lot worse, right? So even in a game like football, and I don't know anything about organized sports, so I'm going to try for this example here. This quarterback is recognizing a pattern. So he has already committed himself to, we're running this play. My receiver's going to do that thing and be in this area, looking for that opening. He's already thinking, he's committed to an action. He's already running a pattern and a play. But then, and I don't know, I guess it's the defense or the offense or whatever, breaks through and someone's going to sack him. I know that term, right? Someone's going to sack him. And now he wasn't perhaps maybe anticipating it, and maybe he was because he's trained or not. But the point is where that person is now coming from. He now has this stimulus response. He sees this, recognizes this pattern. There's movement coming from this side. I have this opening or not, and then he does whatever those responses are. In this case, it's not touch the brake pedal. It's, I don't know, drive down on the ball, run this direction, throw the ball, whatever it is. I honestly don't know. But, he still has a couple of slivers of options that are optimal for him. Throw it, run it, drop down on it, whatever. But in the real world, ambiguity, me reaching back here, are you even noticing a 90-degree elbow angle? Well, it might even be too late and I'm producing something already, etc. So recognizing patterns is the point. We need to put a whole bunch of patterns in front of our people that they don't always know what's going to happen. In fact, I'd rather they don't. So they have to see something and choose, see something and choose. Skill plus experience plus a positive emotion. Now that doesn't mean it goes my way every time. That means, oh, I totally screwed that up. For example, back to I grabbed the gun from the driver and then shot him. Okay, let's rerun that. What did you notice? How can we run that more optimally? The debriefing and the rerunning of that sliver little, I would call it actually a sliver drill. I would have just done it right there. That is how we have a positive emotion on that. I've been here before and I've figured it out. So with that, let's watch a quick hood drill. It's about a minute and a bit long. Yeah. Okay, as you can read there, this is not a commentary on this law enforcement organization. I'm not even mentioning their name. I don't know them. I just found this video, and so I'm using it as an example. Let's just watch. With everything I've framed your brain for already, what do you think is happening?
You're in a room. Okay? There's no doors. No windows. Yeah. Doesn't matter how you got there. Okay. No way out.
Okay, so you're in a room. There's no doors. There's no windows. By the way, you've got a bag on your head, and I'm spinning you around. Is that a useful thing? Serious question. People would tell me, yes, it helps them manage pressure and fear and emotion. Okay. Does it, though? Have you taught this person focus of attention, Our second webinar, internal, external, narrow, and broad, top-down, attentional control, catching myself maybe internal or thinking about things that are not task relevant and shifting them to what are. My eyes aren't task relevant right now when my hand does this, but my shoulder and elbow become relevant, and those cues. Have you taught them that ahead of time? 90% of the time, I don't know with these people in this video, 90+% of the time you haven't, and you certainly haven't taught them double inhale, exhale, calm, cool, collected behavior, capturing my emotional state back. If you're doing things like bag on the head, spinning them around, and telling them what you're telling them, you're in a room with no escape, just survive. It doesn't matter how you got there. Respectfully, it's not optimal for training them to handle stress and pressure of the real world, in my opinion. There's just a better way to go about it if excellent performance in a novel situation, which is what I'm always after with law enforcement, is what you're after. So let's just see what else happens. Walk them into a room. There are 4 role players inside. I want you to notice this guy's hand is almost in a final firing grip already, 90-degree elbow angle.
Yep.
So all he's doing right now, in my mind, is preparing for the worst. He's already got his hand on his gun. Is that what you want in a snap situation? It could be a handshake. If we go back to the originator of these drills, which was for SEAL Team 6, by the way. If you're training operators at that skill level, perhaps you could put them into those situations. Bag comes off, gun in their face. Bag comes off, handshake. Bag comes off, something like that, which is actually what was done. The thing is they've already learned how to deal with pressure. I believe it wasn't formally, having talked to many Tier 1 operators. They just either have a breathing strategy or an attentional strategy or not, but it was never, I have never heard of it trained on purpose by design, which would be awesome if we did that. We could get people far faster, far better, far earlier. Anyway, you can see that this guy's already just basically going to go for a reaction. So 90-degree elbow angle all the time. Into a corner, right? Gun out, into a corner. One guy's got a crowbar, one guy's got a knife, one person's unarmed, and one guy's going to pull a gun in a second. Okay, here we go. All right, and then it's over within split seconds. So this is obviously in their video. They have to decide who's a threat, who isn't. It's radio dispatch and stay alive. Okay. And then I see adrenaline dump accomplished.
Wow.
And I have a very cautious, when I hear we've given them an adrenaline dump, I want them to learn how to manage their state of arousal, keeping it where it needs to be, maybe a little lower when driving a car or doing something, maybe a little higher when about to hit a door with a ram or something like that. That officer practiced no post-gunfight behavior, literally shouted shots fired a bunch of times, which isn't a useful sentence. I don't even know if he had a radio or he was just, I couldn't tell if he was doing it with his hand on his gun or not. But my main point here is, this is just another snippet of that video just showing that 90-degree elbow. Time. But so my main point here is, what did the officer learn from that repetition?
Nothing.
Well, I mean, of course, the 100% answer is we don't know until we speak to this officer, right? But I would say when this happens to 90% of my department, they are just happy to be gone, probably a little more not confident and not competent, second guessing, and the rest of it, versus more competent, more confident, sure as to what they were doing and why. This officer had his hand on his gun, drew his gun, drove himself into a corner and shouted at an armed challenge at everybody, and then shot a guy who was pulling a gun, 100%. And then but seriously, what overall is the takeaway here? Did he learn emotional regulation? Did he learn how to manage ambiguity and uncertainty? That bag on my head walking into a room? That's the moment that happens in. So unless they are debriefing and addressing these things in a manner that I'm preaching, respectfully, this is the kind of thing I would be against. I have no idea how they're doing it. Maybe they are doing it that way. Awesome. But that's what I'm talking about. So 2 seconds or less, they don't rise to the level of their training, right? They fall to the level of what's been wired. And I love this little stabby guy here because in Florida, we do this all the time.
Shooters, stand by.
Course of fire number 1. Does that training help us in this situation? The little snippet where this guy pulls a knife on this cop. It's exactly that.
Exactly it.
It's exactly that. And furthermore, this cop who's now on the ground, also who was actually further back with another vantage point. So do you think that this response was wired in? Was this a trained response or a primal reactive thing? Where was their mind, right? Where was their mind at the moment? Sorry, I thought there was another slide in there. Where was their mind at the moment that they were, standing in front of that guy, seeing his hand do what it was? Was it conceptually thinking, if something were to appear, what would I do? Where would I go? Anyway, that idea. How do we do that? Well, how do we put that in? Well, we go back to the idea of, is this testing or training? Right? What's the difference? When you can't be wrong, I'll ask you, Trevor. What's the difference between testing and training to you?
Well, training, you're maybe not you're not ready for the test, is really what it comes down to. So training is building up to the ultimate test, where the testing is to verify their knowledge, skills, abilities, their judgment, and their ability to put it all together.
Verifying, right?
Verifying,
okay,
yeah.
I love that. Right. So to me, testing reveals performance. Now, that could be in slivers of a second, these rapid cognition drills I'm talking about, or that could be in longer things, 2 seconds or more. And training is what actually builds that.
That's exactly what I just said.
Totally is. So if we go back to this this hood drill example video that we got a snippet of here, is this a testing? Because I don't know, maybe it was, or is this a training? Well, if it's a training, then please do it in the manner that I'm talking about. The testing reveals performance, which now I've seen things happen in it. And, nothing against the officer that performed here, but there's absolutely things I can sharpen with that. Like for example, the hand on the gun to begin with. I mean, his hands can be in a position or posture or something. That's totally fine. But already committed to that, perhaps. I mean, that's a security blanket thing. I would have done it too. I don't want to get walked into a room, and the rest of it. I'd rather have a SWAT team there with me. So that's our first one. Are you training your people when you're doing things like this, or are you testing them? 99.9% of the time, you're training them. The only time I've actually seen things like this for testing is maybe in you've been a cop for a while, special teams selection or something like that. And even then, I just want someone who's trainable. I'm not worried necessarily, as long as they're trainable, I can wire in better responses. So reaction and response. We started with this to begin with. What's the difference? I think you commented on that already, or maybe that was in the as we chatted before this. But what's a reaction versus a response? Well, in a hood drill, or this, for example, this is a hood drill to me. This B-pillar situation, gun just being driven at this guy all of a sudden. He just didn't have a hood on his head, which I like, because putting a bag on someone's head is not something I'm necessarily, I'm not necessarily for it yet either. It's not a contextual thing I need them to handle and deal with. But being in a car with a person who's being an a-hole to them and other people moving around in traffic, and that is something I need them to learn how to manage, right? So reactiveness and responsiveness. So we're going to be over the next couple of slides. Reactiveness, that primal reaction from the loss prevention officer and the cop, right, who got out of there, then was like, oh crap, got his gun, went back to work. Amazing performance. It's fast, almost instant. It's triggered by shock, novelty, or surprise, something I didn't expect. I'm driving a car. Whoa, there's a collision or something over there. Catches my attention, just like we talked about in the attention webinar. but I have to go, hey, still driving a car, or I'm going to rear-end somebody. So driven by startle and emotion, and it's action without clarity. Whereas responsiveness is still very fast, driven by recognition. That's the point here. How do we get people to recognize? Because we put them in lots of slivers of patterns, built on perception, and his action is aligned with the context. This red dot article that I put up here is a free article on my website shop. You can download it for free, like you buy it for $0. It has the following images in it, which you can use at your department. Just reference the article, because I was given the ability to put those into the printed material from the people I got them from. And so here they are, right? So for example, here's an image of a role player pulling a weapon system. All these images are inside of that article, and the circle is the central foveal vision of an operator who's watching this, of a cop, a counter-terrorist member, and he's already getting his gun out. Well, he notices the critical cue, the elbow angle in this case, and he does something. He starts getting his gun out. It's driven by fast recognition. He has been in these situations before, where if you look at the little circle where you've seen this versus this versus this type of idea, and we can literally, I make games of this, so recruits in an academy have seen so many of these situations, not just seen them, but wired them to maybe getting their own gun out, not committed to a shot, looking to, is this a shoot? Oh, it isn't. Fine, it is. Moving my eyes and attention to where I want the bullets to go, and then doing that, therefore not shooting a role player in the hand, and just doing amazing performance. This is what we have to show them, just as one example. So there's that shift as the role player's turning, of the expert performer looking to the future to see, is it going to be a gun or not? This is all founded in grounded and informed by research. There's a great startle response firearm drawing thing here by research done by Dr. Michael Cantor. Spoke to him. He's an excellent researcher, where he put officers into a domestic that was over with. They're taking a report, short version of this. You can see the layout on there, talking to the lady, and then all of a sudden the door opens, a man walks in and literally just starts shooting at these officers immediately. So here's the key point. Just look at the little screen I'm on here. Every officer started to do a flinch reaction, or they started to raise their trapezius, their shoulders, and their hands started to come up a little bit in a, quote, shock, novelty, or surprise. Whoa, that thing is happening. This took about a second and a half to take place before most people were able to get their guns out. Well, that's like 6 to 8 rounds fired at you in that amount of time by the average person. The key point here is some of these officers had a dramatically less, and in 2 cases, no discernible flinch response, went to guns and got to work right away. Well, that's what we want. So it is absolutely possible. How did it get in there? And that's my whole point, On Purpose by Design, my company, and how to do that. So I'm just saying, like, this is grounded and supported by the research. So the attentional control and SA situational awareness website, I'm referencing back to all those things. Here we are. Shock, novelty, or surprise has captured us. Your brain stem, that quote-unquote lizard brain, right? So this is back in the attention webinar. It says, hey, is it a threat or not? And that could just be, hey, you got to give a presentation to your boss. I mean, you could perceive that as a threat as well. It grabs at you, and it's a bottom-up capture, right? So we talk about that. Why? Because it's the bottom brain stem. That is a bottom-up Whoa, have I been here before? What am I going to do? Is it within reach? Can I bat at it? Do I go for my gun? Do I just comply until I can, whatever it is? But we need to be in these situations, which is what when I talk about game intelligence, that's the attentional filter to produce, the most optimal response in under 2 seconds. That's what we're talking about here. So again, hence why role players are shot in the hand. Our fault. I've already described how to fix it. That is top-down redirectional control. I see that happening I've been in situations like this before. It's not a shoot yet, but I should be getting my gun out, maybe moving to a position of advantage, or at least put in movement if I can. Concurrent activity. My frontal lobe says that elbow's important, and now drive my eyes to where the thing is likely to appear so I can make a good split-second decision. If you see that and you're wiring in concurrent activity, right, then that's a good thing. But the problem is, if every time you see a gun, you go for your gun every time, even close up to someone when they're within arm's reach, or at a B pillar when a gun could be right within arm's reach, we have to provide those when this is an option better, that's an option better. Those split-second decisions, how do we do that? We have to train high variability in the skill set to make the decision. Everything I should be saying in these webinars should be the same in each of them. So here's a sliver of a hood drill here. Officers already got their gun out, bag on their head, it'll come off, and this attacker literally is already on top of her. Stabbing, 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 and stabbing. She finally gets him to go back, tries for her gun, and it either came out of battery or it was set up to be a stoppage to begin with. What happens in the next frame is she clears it, tap, rack, assess, or whatever your verbiage is, goes back and shoots the guy, and that's that. The problem is by that point, he had already dropped the knife. She literally goes back on video, this is all videoed, and has a bit of an emotional meltdown. I just shot an unarmed person, how could I have done that? Well, what's the residue of this experience? Was it, I'm more confident and competent? No, it wasn't. Now, that doesn't mean that she didn't do something that was not optimal, but we have to digest, address, and more importantly, we have to guide her through how to now come back and do better with that. I'm not sure how they handled it. Again, it's not a commentary on this specific training. I'm just saying that when you do that. Furthermore, the fact that she was already committed. She was committed to a shot. She then started a rote pattern yep. of tap, rack, assess. Well, it was probably tap, rack, bang actually, yep. And went back and shot. You wired that into them. You literally wired that into her because there was no assessment. Because in Florida, you shoot at the guy with his arm bent like this, right? I always make fun of that. That's not even a deadly force threat. And if anything happens to your gun, you just go back and shoot each time. So in fact, we should be telling her, actually, we probably wired that into you. This is how we're now going to address that. Was this officer put in a position where prior to she was taught to handle her emotional state via her attentional redirection and breathing? Probably not, right? So if you're doing this without doing that, then respectfully, you're certainly not following what I'm telling you. Could we have put her in a position without a bag on her head, just to close her eyes, then to have this guy, as she opens them, shove her back, and then go for a weapon grab, and now she figures some, and we just kind of slow down that timeline a little bit. We could build up to the sewing machine, for example, and a stoppage in the gun, and the rest of it. Yeah, I do that with high-end operators, but we have to progressively load it so that we're putting more pressure on them. The only reason to add pressure is to practice emotional redirection and breathing. And so if you're not training those things and progressively loading them, then you're not doing quote unquote hood drills or bag drills or rapid cognition drills the way that I'm talking about. Anyway, poor hood drills. They amplify the startle. There's urgency there with zero understanding. There's just guessing under pressure and emotional overwhelm. That's the residue 90% of the time when I watch hood drill implementation. So we think we are training them to make decisions, but we're actually just training them to guess fast and then survive it and get the heck out of there, or not survive it and get the heck out of there.
And then dread training.
And absolutely, they're not coming back to my training to thrive. They're coming back to merely survive. Again, I'm not training decisions directly. I'm training the inputs. Right? So experts, again, this is all just a recap. Experts don't recognize, they don't compare options. They don't go, what should I do here? I've got a pistol in my hand. All of a sudden, someone's sewing machining me. They go, recognize pattern and act. So the goal of training should be to build recognizable patterns under realistic conditions. I do not start with full speed and intensity. I scale it down to what looks like 5 ounces to you and me, but it's 5 pounds metaphorically on their barbell at that time, and I load them up. This is how I do these things. Again, skill has to be perception driven. Perception driven. The goal of the instructor or coach, if it's too easy, they're bored, too hard, they're overwhelmed. You got to find what's called the challenge point framework, 5 pounds on their barbell. If they can't process it, in retrospect, because there was a rapid cognition drill in this picture just happened, and then the instructor goes, great, talk to me. How did that go? What did you notice? What did you find important? All right, that should take, well, especially when a sliver drill like that, it should take like 5 times longer.
Yeah.
And then we run it a bunch more times under variations of the same. Maybe it's a shoot, maybe it's not a shoot, maybe it's a whatever. That's how we build this. Typically seen, we go random overwhelm, no perceptual guidance, and perceptual guidance is everything I'm talking about. That is how I run these drills, and it was done we've talked about all that coaching language in webinar 3, I believe it was. No progression and no repetitions with adjustment. That's our key point here. So you got to teach breathing and attention first. Then we load it every single time, training their perceptions, recognition through variability, and it's contextual pressure. That's it. So coaches need to say things like, what did you see? What did you focus on? Did your student even understand the problem before they were acting? Was it a response or was it a reaction? And that's how we change those. So now you should be able to go back to these videos, right? We could play the doorbell cam here. Went for a double leg takedown on a guy, which is awesome. Unfortunately, the guy had a knife in his hand. Okay. B pillar, roll the window down, and the other guy, show me your hands, and ends up firing. We should be able to go back to those videos now, put them into drills, and be able to debrief and scale them, ramp up the intensity, speed, complexity, add stoppages into their gun, things like that. That's how we go about doing this. I'll just jump through those. So let's watch this last video here, and I'm almost done.
Get on the ground right now! Police, get on the ground right now! Police, get on the ground right now!
Okay, foot pursuit, get on the ground right now. Could we make this a drill? Absolutely we could. You lose sight of a guy, do you go for a final firing grip or not? What are you checking as soon as you make that corner on the guy? Things like that. Does he stop and turn around like this guy's about to do? Here we go.
Get on the ground right now! Get on the ground! Ah! Get on the ground! Ah! 57 shots fired! I'm shot.
Okay, so we're going to see a second body cam in a second of his partner running in behind him. So what happened was that guy turned around. It went to guns really quick. Do you think that the officer who we were just point of view on, do you think he equal height, equal light or whatever? Do you think there was? Yeah, probably not. If he was checking and knew where his dot was, he was probably shooting too slow if that were the case. Yeah. Drive that gun, but where? Towards the guy's hand, towards the guy's chest. Your hit now is the important thing doing business there, getting on the radio, whatever. I mean, we could break this down a lot. Let's see the second camera view.
I'm shot.
Which is apparently on the next video. Okay, so this is the second cop behind the first one. Here we go. Love, I wonder if he went on the other side of that car on purpose, right? Because his partner was going that way. He was probably making some amazing decisions he's probably unaware of. Anyway, here it goes to guns. You see this cop already grabbing at his gun. He knows it's something bad's happening. Okay, so that all happened very quickly. Let's see what happens next.
Representing shot fired!
Fucking move again, I'm gonna shoot you.
I'm shot.
Give me cover to 2600.
Okay, and I'm not coming down on this officer, right? You move again and I'm going to shoot you. Well, expletive, I'm going to shoot you. And then holstered. So was that person in a position of disadvantage? Where's a weapon system or not? Anyway, we could start talking about all that, but all of these things have been either wired in previously or we're missing a golden opportunity to address and just absolutely own and optimize the crap out of this. This could easily become, I hope you can see now, rapid cognition drills. Turn around, guy's grabbing a guy. Turn around, this is happening. But I have the ability, and I'm happy to talk more about it, if the interest is there, how to actually scale that all the way down to the very, very, very beginning. With what, like I said, it's like 5 ounces to you on your barbell,
Yep.
and you quickly ramp it up. It's just that conceptually in law enforcement, we don't really just know how to do that. So hopefully just even with this video, you can see how that would go. And with that, I just asked Trevor, I think we're at 1 hour.
Something like that, yeah.
That's me. Hopefully you're getting value out of this. Trevor, what questions or comments do you have on that?